Hey folks, so I wanted to share a few thoughts with you today and obviously pose a few questions as well to you about the current state of street photography and maybe where you see it heading. And are you a fan of where it is? And do you also believe that maybe it was affected in those years of 2020 and onwards? Because I'm currently seeing the effects of things that I felt were happening then. And at least in my own opinion, I feel like I was kind of on the correct path of where street photography might be heading. And then now I'm also starting to see it being reflected in the comment sections and stuff like that on content posted online in regards to street photography. So as I do that, so you don't get bored of me just yapping, I'm going to be showing you a video of myself walking around the streets of Genova in Italy a couple of years ago, shooting some street photography. This whole video was only captured in about 4 hours-ish of photography, and it gives you a good example of how amazing this city is for street photography. It's probably my favorite city that I've ever been to and photographed in, and I would love to return. On this particular day, there was this Genova Design Week advertising plastered everywhere in the small alleyways, which is a bit of a bummer because the advertising was fine, but in photos, I didn't really want it there. So I actually kind of avoided the alleyways quite a lot on this day. And it was really the only day that I got to do some street photography. So looking forward to going back. It's a really beautiful city. If you get the chance to visit, I highly recommend it. But yeah, anyhow, I'm going to share with you a bunch of opinions. These are all posed as questions as well. So anything I say, it's not doctrine, it's just how I feel. And it might be my own little bubble, I recognize that. So if you feel like I'm completely off or you're having a completely different experience, I would love to have my opinion changed on the matter as well. So as 2020 approached, and we all know how the world was affected in that year, I think we saw a rise in popularity in photography. Now, I think it probably happened for a lot of hobbies because people were looking for hobbies to attend to, right? Like they had, in most cases, people had a lot more time on their hands, and maybe they went to pick up that old camera that's been sitting around for a while. Maybe they even picked up a new camera and they looked for genres of photography to get into. Now, obviously, the bubble that I'm in and the genre of photography I pay most attention to is street photography. So I did witness a big influx of street photographers, and in particular new street photographers. So of course they are amateurs, right? And that's not an insult to anybody. It's just if you start out, you're going to be an amateur, and that's fine. Everybody's an amateur at some point. And what I saw, obviously, with the result of that was a lot more amateur work being published, right? So again, a normal thing. More people get into it, more people publish stuff on social media, and then, there's a flood. And I feel like that flood slowed down a little bit now, but I also do feel like the effects of that has sort of stuck around. And unfortunately, some of that is that amateurness, because you can be very influenced by things that you see online. And unfortunately, at the beginning, I don't think you always really know what is good and what is not. And that's all subjective, of course, blah, blah, blah. But we know that there is good stuff and not as good stuff. I think we all have some agreement on that somewhere. We'll overlap in those thoughts, right? So you're kind of wondering, what is the problem here? Now, I've seen this happen a few times, and I can relate it to other things. I think it's probably happened in music production and a more niche subculture that I've also been a part of, like an art subculture, is the tattoo art and the tattoo culture in the West. And here's my problem with it, is that when you flood something with a lot of amateur work, people viewing that are going to see that as somewhat of a standard, assuming that the person viewing it is somebody who's not an art critic in some way. Maybe they're not critical of photography, they're not critical particularly of street photography or specifically of street photography. And so what ends up happening is the people viewing it, which let's say could be people who might be fans when they see good stuff. They might be fans of yours if you were producing good content. They kind of get the genre watered down for them, and they won't be aware of that, right? Because again, they're not critics. It's fine to not be a critic. You can just be a passive enjoyer. Maybe it's just something that pops up on your feed. But what I do see that happens is it kind of ruins the reputation or maybe the value of the art form as that's happening. Because again, you're giving a lot of, a big increase of amateur work goes out under the name of street photography. And most of the people that are consuming that are not photographers, not specifically street photographers, and maybe not critics at all of these particular art forms, right? So again, that's all very normal. We're in the minorities here for assuming that you watching this video, you're probably interested in photography, right? So then I think what happens to the masses is that they go, well, I don't really like street photography, because what they're getting presented is, well, as I say, an amateur version. And again, it's not even a dig at the people doing that work. You should be taking photos and publishing your work. You should also be critical, but you know, do as you wish. And that's kind of a normal thing to be happening. But now kind of what I'm seeing is maybe the result of the watering down of the art form. And that's, you know, people being influenced by other amateur photographers. So I don't know what they call that. I don't know, there's probably studies to this or a name for it, but you're kind of creating this weird cycle of, you know, people get into it, they're amateur, and then they inspire other people just to stay amateur. I don't know, I hope that comes across not rude. I'm not trying to be rude, I'm just trying to point out what I think does happen and what I witness happening. And it's a shame. I know that you could argue, don't worry about what other people are doing, the good stuff will always come to the top and all that kind of thing, but again, it's one of my issues with it is that I don't think that's entirely true. I think if you're to look at a lot of really good street photographers online, they have lesser followings than these other people that if you wanted to be critical about it, which, you know, I think when it matters, then you should be critical about it, that they're, you know, their engagement is far less. And again, you can argue that engagement isn't everything. Of course, we all know that likes and followers isn't everything, but we can also agree that those metrics do allow doors to be opened for you, whether it's, you know, sales, more sales of your book or your prints or job opportunities. It's very realistic that that happens. I know this because I've been through it myself. And so I don't think it's entirely true that, you know, just being good or just producing good work is what's going to stand out on top. And, you know, in addition to that, I think really good street photographers aren't churning out good work every week. It's just not the way that it works. We try, absolutely, but a good street photographer will know that that's extremely difficult. At best, you live in an incredibly busy and diverse city, and you're able to at least have that opportunity to make something good every week. But a lot of us don't, including myself. I live in a very quiet city, and you know, it's difficult to go out and even get something usable every week, let alone something that you might consider yourself to be good. So I think we can kind of abolish that. And so I think it's a two-factor thing happening. The general perception of what street photography is has been watered down by an influx of amateur photographers who I would largely also say, whether we're innocently, you know, joining into a craft or a hobby because they had the extra time, to maybe a little less innocent of people who joined because they saw the rise, right? We saw the bubble of it getting bigger and bigger during those years of the pandemic. And they kind of, you know, sort of abused it for its, you know, popularity, to get likes and to get followers. And of course, you have to acknowledge that that takes away from the art form in one degree or another. And in addition to that, I think where, you know, I'm saying these kind of amateurs inspire amateurs. And again, what I mean by that, I don't mean that to be offensive. I studied to be a tattoo artist, and when I was a complete amateur, I didn't really even know what to look for. I didn't know what a good reference was, and I didn't know who was really doing good work. I could use my eyes to a degree, of course, but it actually took some teaching and some research and some understanding to figure out what actually was good. And I guess to also spot mistakes and things like that, you know, technically were things that you shouldn't be doing. And it took time to learn that. So my point is that when I was an amateur, it would have been very easy for me to look at certain things that were also amateur in quality and be inspired by them and just go down that route and maybe learn the same mistakes and those kind of things. So again, I'm not trying to be offensive. I think just it is a process in the learning. And if you are self-aware when you're learning, you will know that you're doing these things and that there's potential to get lost. So, but as that happens, I think what happens with it is the ethics also become amateur. and the expectations and where we should take street photography. And what we're looking at now, or at least again in my experience, or what I see online or what I see on comment sections, is that it's been watered down to this point where people are discussing, should we be taking photos of people without their permission? That's obviously been a conversation for the longest time, but I feel like that's increasing. And I think the understanding of why or why not, or when not to, is watered down in the same way that the entire art form has been watered down by the people who are participating in it and the people who are viewing it. So I think there's a lot of people, for a good example for that is, what I see a lot is, I only photograph the backs of people's heads and stuff, or, I hide the faces in my images because I feel like that's respectful. But I feel like those are also people that are just following people online who do that style of street photography. And I won't mince my words on this part, but I think that stuff sucks. I mean, it's just like, it's good to do when you start. It's a really good way to kind of learn by figuring out your ethics, like go out there and do it and listen to your body, listen to your mind, listen to the people. I always encourage also talking more to the people and figure out how they feel if you took their photograph without asking first. And you can talk to them after, and you can also delete the photo, or if they're happy with it, do whatever you want. But going out there and photographing the backs of people's heads from across the road, do it at the start. But if you're going to consider yourself a good street photographer eventually, I think you need to push past that. I think there's a good reason to say that easy art isn't good, because if it's easy, everybody does it, and then if everybody does it, there's a lot of it, and the appreciation of it goes down. Is the whole kind of thing that I'm getting at here, right? So yes, to some degree, good art has to be difficult. I'm not saying that's the entire thesis, but yeah, there's that. And again, I think what's happening is that when those amateurs inspire amateurs, I think they're going out and saying, well, my favorite street photographer never photographs anybody's face, or my favorite street photographer never approaches anybody and photographs them without asking. But your favorite street photographer is probably not doing that good work, or they're only been doing it 3 or 4 years in some cases, because you might be inspired by that person. And a lot of the time what they're really being inspired by is a good composition and good editing or a good preset. And that happens a lot because, again, an amateur is looking at the work and being inspired by it. Not knowing what to be critical of, not knowing, does this have social commentary, not knowing what the ethics are, not understanding there's more ethics than just one, that they differ and they're as diverse as there are photographers, For every street photographer I talk to, there's a different combination of ethics that they run by. And they're all worth listening to, and they're all worth trying to understand. And I think different people have, different ways of figuring out how to do this art form. And hopefully, doing it in a way that is not going to annoy anybody, and also helps them sleep at night, and also helps them produce good work. So there's a lot to be considered there. But again, I think a lot of the amateurs are coming out just going like, I like this guy or girl who photographs people from 100 meters away, and I just see a silhouette in the distance, and they use the composition of a building to put the framing together, and then they edit it really nice with nice colors. And that's what they're going out to reproduce. And again, if you've lost sight at this point, you're listening to me and you're going, why do you care? You can do whatever you want to do. I also do that stuff sometimes, by the way. I'm in a quiet city, so I've said it before, but I get what I can get. Sometimes if I'm out there and that's just the only photo that I see on the day, I'll take it, because you need to, maybe not so much anymore that I do it, but I have done a lot in the past, well past my level of, my skill level, I guess, years into photographing. Sometimes you just grab the easy shot. Sometimes it's worth it. And sometimes you just want to have fun, so that's fine. But you're asking why I care. And why I care is because I care a lot about the art form. And I have seen what I feel like is, like I say, the watering down, to repeat myself. You could even argue the destruction of street photography. I think a lot of that is happening by amateur viewers. You know, there's a lot of really loud people in the comment sections of social media on street photography content talking about how it shouldn't be done like that. And I can only assume that the majority of those people have never done street photography. That's likely to be true. In my little clicking around, you know, every now and again you browse on who's making this comment. None of them ever have like street photography content or even photography content on their profiles. So they're trying to be, I guess, what do you call it, socially aware or something like that. Which, I mean, the irony of that, it's always usually privacy based, which to me is hilarious. Like, we're losing our privacy more than ever. That's always, again, been a conversation. You know, people talk about, you know, CCTV cameras and whatever, maybe even just general social media stuff at this point. But if you want to go down that rabbit hole of looking at what is happening to your privacy, go for it. I have no sympathy for your sanity because it's absolutely insane. Now with the rise of AI and everything, there is no hiding from nothing at any point. A street photographer is not your worry. Like, I can assure you that as someone who keeps up with these conversations fairly well with AI and social media and internet privacy and all these kind of things, we're screwed. There's no other way to put that. Someone taking your photo on the street because they're trying to, you know, have a nice Saturday with their favorite hobby. I mean, leave those people alone. If that's really your conversation, I think 99.9% of the time that person's also not trying to do anything bad towards you, and they might not even conduct themselves very well. But you have to factor in there's there's people out there that make mistakes or they're new, and that happens. That happens to all of us. I probably didn't conduct myself the best I could in all situations and every day that I've had street photographing. It's a weird art form. There's a lot of risk involved. Anyways, I'm probably preaching to the choir because if you're listening still, you're probably a street photographer and you already know what I'm saying. Although our opinions may differ too on how this thing can be achieved. And so to cut back to why I think we're there is because, you know, this whole conversation, that whole side of the conversation, the complete misunderstanding and unacknowledgement of the entire history of street photography and how important it's been to document history in that way. It's another amazing and fascinating and important way of documenting history, right? Street photography. And those people that are discussing it, those people that are being loud about it, and the people that are being ultimately probably listened to eventually are people who are unaware of those things. And they're people who are digesting amateur street photography and they feel like they have a place to speak. Because most of the time they're looking at photos, again, people 50 meters away from their subject and behind them. And then so when you go and photograph somebody that is showing their face, or maybe you're a meter away from that person on the street, you've got a lot of loud, overly conscious people about something that they don't know much about are voicing their opinion. And that makes sense. I don't think it's, you know, a good thing. And the way that they're getting away with that and the way that that's going to make a negative impact on this art form that is, as I say, is very important. And if it makes, things any clearer, the art form that I absolutely love, why, you know, it makes a negative impact is because that voice will eventually be listened to. And I've seen it being listened to already by some street photographers. And again, I think a lot of those people, then again, it's not a criticism, but I think they're somewhat amateur, maybe they're just hobbyists, maybe they're people who found a lot of likes and follows in photographing the backs of people's heads, that they're also in agreement, right? Because it allows them to sit in their comfort zone. Photographing up close or photographing people's faces or making eye contact or having to talk to the people that you photographed on the street, that makes things more difficult for you. And, well, funnily enough, it also gets you a lot less attention online. So you can sit in your little comfort zone and be happy and not be confronted. And, you know, you get validated online by people that are loud and, not very educated on the art form. And you'll probably actually also get more print sales and work opportunities, right? Because you're not violating and not in my words, but somebody's privacy. And that's beneficial for things like companies and stuff who would otherwise require some sort of model release or press release to publish any of these things or reshare any of these things, right? So it's all very cozy and comfortable in that scene. But I think for someone like myself, and I'm sure for many others, that is not ideal in the long run. And I think we're going to lose a lot if we listen to those voices. I do think that this happened, during those years of 2020 and onwards, through what we all experienced. And I said it then, and I was a bit uncertain about how it would develop, and it took longer than what I thought it would to develop, but I'm really starting to see it now. Maybe your experience is different. As I say at the start of the video, I'm very happy to change my mind, like I don't sort of want to obviously witness this and see it as like a negative thing. I want to only think positive things about the development of street photography. As a whole, I'll also be very clear, this is all positive stuff in a way, these conversations about it, and it's always going to develop the art form. And if I hadn't said it already in the video, I think more people entering the art form is a good thing in the long run. You will always see these little dips of negative impact in a way as people enter, and they're just, they spark interesting conversations. But yeah, I just don't want it to see it go the ways of many other things. I think photography as a whole could be argued that the more people got into it, the level went down. It wasn't a profession anymore to a particular individual. And as the work floods in, there's an oversaturation, the appreciation of it goes down, and now it's harder and harder to make a living as a photographer, right? If you're sitting there as a photographer, I'm sure you might agree. And I've said this also in the video, but quality work will stand out, but I don't think in the same way that it has done in the past. And, photography is photography, street photography, street photography. They're kind of different in their own ways because you are in this weird zone. I think street photography is always the most contentious, if that's the right word, as far as discussions go on how it should be done and what the ethics of it are, and should it even be done that way. But for myself, I really do believe that the difficult work is probably the good work, and you do have to fend off those comments, you have to have those conversations. I would like it to be had by people who are somewhat experienced and somewhat knowledgeable on the history of the art form and its importance. But as we become more and more connected and we're able to open up more and more conversations in the comment section, then that conversation, that stage or that microphone gets opened up to sort of everybody. That's, again, it's great in the long run, but I think in those short windows you can get a lot of loud and ignorant people, and that's fine if they're not listened to. However, I do fear that they might start to be listened to, and I just wonder, is that old style of street photography going to start to fade away? Are we going to lose something? Is this progression? Is it a positive thing in the long run? Are we going to, sort of follow suit of technology or have a response to technology where, it's completely eradicating our privacy at all? So we do value, much more in-person privacy. I'm not sure, are these things that are even consciously thought about, or is it like a subconscious reaction that we're having? Are people so nervous about that stuff now that just having your photo taken is something that you want to combat because it's much more understandable? You're already feeling like somewhat violated with all these conversations and applications, terms and conditions, all the stuff that you don't read. That stuff is taking away your sense of privacy, but you just don't really know how to completely understand that if you're not like a huge tech person. Maybe you don't even know how to even begin to fight that, or maybe feel like you can't, as a lot of us do. So when someone takes your photo, you're kind of already ready to kick off. And again, that might just be a subconscious thing. So yeah, that's a lot. That's my stream of consciousness here. I'm sorry if it was a little bit all over the place. If you've listened this far, I really appreciate you, and I'd be really interested in hearing your thoughts. I hope you do good. I hope you do good work, and we make some beautiful street photography all together as a collective, and don't hurt anybody's feelings in the process. Until next time, stay creative. Peace.